a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens?
So I'm going to start with kind of giving you a little bit about Robin. Really thrilled to have Robin Anselmi. She's the Chief Executive Officer and President of Conversant. And Conversant is a leadership and organizational development company. And she's going to share her story, her philosophy, her experience with a rare and enlightened and thought-provoking topic, and that's courageously leading with love. And she's going to also share her perspective on why does having women in leadership matter, and what are some of the unique contributions and perspectives women bring as leaders. Now, a little bit about Robin. She has had a fascination with design since her early career in engineering. She's one of the few women in engineering in the day, probably was the only one in her class, manufacturing and financial services. She brings her practicality and process orientation to finding collaborative solutions with her clients, and by the way, with the Conversant community. Robin loves helping individuals and organizations turn their strategies into stories that motivate and engage your workforce. And she's also passionate about helping leaders close the gap between their current reality and their best intentions. One of the things I love about Robin is that she's dedicated to changing the notion that communication and collaboration are soft skills. She sees them as the most powerful leadership skills for leaders who want sustainable business results. She's a strong advocate for the two things that many of you articulate a lot, and that's connection and love. Robin has worked extensively with clients in financial services, healthcare, and technology. And the challenge she sees every day is that clients' ability to create amazing and surprising results is coordinated or correlated to how well connected they are to what matters most to their employees and their customers. I mean, you can see why she's here. On a personal note, I think it was last year, right, Robin? Well, I met Anne a couple years ago. You guys know that through the Magnolias. And Anne invited me into a conversation with Conversant. And I had a phenomenal conversation with Robin and the founder, Mickey O'Connelly. And after about 2 or 3 conversations with Mickey and Robin, I realized that I was experiencing love. Then Robin invited me to collaborate with the entire Conversant community. And over the course of a year and a half, I consistently experienced love over and over and over again. There's something really, really, really special about the people and culture at Conversant. With everyone, and I mean everyone I met, I felt authentically seen. I felt truly heard. And I felt valued. And this enabled me to be authentically me, to the point where I cried during some of our dialogues with the entire community. I mean, it was amazing how welcoming and how present everyone was. So again, there's something beautiful about this community of people. And yes, this is where, however, they're dream makers in my view, and they're demonstrating that it's possible to lead with love. So with that, I'm going to ask the question that everybody knows I always ask. For this question, we can just zero in on Robin, and then we'll go back to the community. But the question is, Robin, would you share the most compelling, defining moments in your life that shaped you into who you are and where you are today?
It's such a big question, but first, I just always have to pause and say thank you, Michelle. You make me sound much nicer and better than I feel like I am in that conversation. And I would love to have heard your introduction, because it might have sounded different to each other in a much different context. But just thank you for the generosity of that introduction and the love that you experience with us is mutual. So we have been so grateful to have you as a guide through the process that we've been in the last year. So first, just thank you. Okay, the story, the things in my life. I grew up in northern New Jersey in upper middle class, really normal household, unremarkable in a lot of ways, and remarkable to me, I guess. My parents are in their 70s. They were high school sweethearts. They are still madly in love, and I think that shapes my perspective on human relationships. I said they started dating when they were sophomores in high school and are now 74. So I find that to be remarkable and a part of my life in terms of the story. For me, I said this to Michelle last week and she was a little shocked when I said it. I was a really shy kid, which people that know me think like that seems odd, but I was really quite introverted and shy as a child. I was a good student. I really found my place in high school, and this is an important part of the story for me as a leader. I joined the marching band. I was not a particularly great musician, but it was the high school marching band in my town was sort of a big deal. Some towns have that, but like this one was a pretty big deal. I competed all the time, but it was the first time I'd actually been part of a team. Right, so marching band really is a team, and found sort of my people to be with in that sort of traumatic time that is high school. My senior year, in terms of things that were really mark my life, I decided to try out for the drum major. So for those of you who are not in marching bands, drum major is sort of like the captain. They're the person that directs the band. They are the leaders of the band. It was again, we had a competitive band. So this was a sort of a big deal. And I was one of two that were selected. That high school sent our drum majors to a band camp run by a professional drum major. His name was George Parks. And George made a very big impression on me. I actually went and dug it out. I have a whole notebook of things that he taught us. But I have to tell you that for me, while a lot of it was marching and conducting, most of it was leadership. Most of it was really, how do you lead a group of peers? How do you do that in a way that takes into account the individual and the collective talents? How do you get the most out of people? So much of this is about mood. He used to call it hype, but it was really like, what was the mood that you brought, that you as the leader had to bring the mood that you needed the band to have, that you needed the music to have. And it really was such an amazing experience for me as a 16, 17-year-old to lead 125 of my peers and to really have that experience and to learn from somebody who was a leader around what did that mean in the world. Again, it was in this really narrow slice, and it wasn't until much later that I could look back and go like, oh, like those are all the things that he was teaching us at the time. We'll get into this later. There's some really interesting things when I was looking back through this about women as well that he had to offer in that like some of it's really good and some of it I wonder about today, but we could talk about that later. So the drum major in the band and sort of my experience of that was absolutely sort of a notable thing for me. The second experience was I am an engineer. I do have an engineering degree. That time in my life, both in college, I was not the only one, Michelle, but I was one of very few. I often tell the story, my freshman year, I was walking across I went to Rutgers. So those of you familiar, Rutgers in New Jersey is a very large university. I think at the time across all its campuses, there were 35 or 40,000 students, so large. The engineering campus, much smaller, still fairly large. I want to say we had 1,000 students in my graduating class. And I was walking across campus my freshman year and someone said hello to me by name early in my freshman year. And I turned to the guy I was walking across campus with and I said, like, how do people know my name? Like, I don't know these people. How do they know my name? He looked at me, he goes, you're kidding, right? And I said, no. He goes, you're one of 10 girls. Like, we all know your name. We all know who you are. Like, and it's this feeling of like, oh, like, so it was just being the other in a conversation really for the first time, I think. So that was just an interesting, and there was many of those that happened. If we can get into that again. I went to work for Corning in Wilmington, North Carolina, in their optical fiber manufacturing plant. I had a number of really interesting experiences, but the one that sort of stands out for me there, I worked on a construction site for about 2.5 years. So hard hat, steel toe boots, putting in new equipment. And I learned the power of my voice for others. So while I was 25, I'm tall. And so you can't tell that from sitting. I have a presence when I walk into a room. And I was leading a group of engineers, but also tradesmen, construction folks in building out a facility. And we had an experience. There was no elevator in the building because it was under construction. So we used to walk, there was an outside metal staircase. You had to walk up and walk down. And the tradesmen, mostly men, would sit along the stairs. And we'd have to walk up and walk down. And there was a very young woman, so I was 25 or 26. There was a very young woman on the team. She was right out of college, very petite. And I was walking behind her one day and watched the men catcall her the entire way up the stairs. I turned around, walked into this gentleman's name was Jerry O'Razum. Jerry ran the site. And I said, that cannot happen. Like, you have to go out there and do something about that. Like, it's one thing when it's me, but this poor girl is scared to death and you're not doing anything about it. And he cleared the stairs. He went out immediately, cleared the stairs, and said if he caught anybody doing that again, they'd be fired on the spot. So it was the first time of actually like really taking a stand and knowing that I could do that. And having somebody listen. So taking a stand, having somebody listen. And that there were a lot of small events like that happened when I was an engineer, but that was the one that was big because the other ones had to do with me standing for myself. This was me really taking a stand, I think, for others in that. I went to work, I went from there to Capital One. So I was an analyst for Capital One. There's two notable things for me about that experience where I met Conversant. So, and that was my first experience with Conversant was when I was at Capital One. So that's sort of what got me here today. But the other thing was I decided in that time that corporate America and I had a different point of view about what work-life balance should look like. I'd had two children by then and left that to go do my own, in my wisdom at that age, thought that having my own practice would be simpler than working inside corporate America. I'm not sure that turned out to be exactly accurate, but it did give me a lot of room to make different choices. And then when I was out on my own, I had two experiences. I was a coach for mostly male executives who were looking to make a change in their careers. I did it for about 8 years and I reached a point of absolute burnout. I realized that there were two things that sort of led to that. One is I was on the board of directors for a local nonprofit here in Richmond. And in being the chairman of the board for that, I realized I really missed the group interactions. I was only doing one-on-one coaching. But the other thing was I realized I lost all my empathy. I got tired of listening to senior executives leaving their jobs and telling the same stories about poor them. And I realized that you really can't be a coach without empathy. So I called Conversant looking for a coach for myself, and they said, you should come work for us. And I did. So that's the other thing that was just really, I think, a notable moment in my career.
So instead of, wait a minute, you called them looking for a coach and
I did. I called them looking for a coach, and they said, Richard Reinashek, who was one of the founders, said, I told you 5 years ago you should come work for us. You said at the time you didn't want to travel. Your kids are a little older now. Like, I don't think you need a coach. I think you should just come work for us. Call Mickey. So essentially, that's what I did. The work I did for them initially was honestly glorified admin. I was putting PowerPoints together for one of the partners at the time, two of the partners at the time. I did stuff just to kind of get my foot in the door. And then that sort of grew from that into a contractor position, into a retainer position, into here I am.
So from admin to president and CEO, that's quite a journey. Okay, so Can you tell us a little bit about Conversant? I poured my heart out because that's how I really feel about you folks. And how would you describe what makes you folks distinct and unique?
We help organizations to evolve by looking at both the leaders and the leadership, and we do it through conversation. So for us, conversation is the most underutilized, underappreciated asset in an organization, and it is how humans connect. And so if you want to get more done, if you want to be more productive, have more joy, it really has to be through how the human beings connect. And the way we connect is in conversation. So our particular focus is on the quality and timing of conversations that an organization's having. If you want an organization to change, the conversations have to change. So how are you actually making sure that the way you're in conversation with each other is aligned with the strategy and the culture, and also, frankly, the way human beings work? So what are the principles of being human that we actually need to be paying attention to?
Is that what you refer to as your point of view?
It's that, and really that the quality and timing of conversation matter inside of all of that. I don't know, Anne, what do you think? Would you add anything?
Can you add to that? Is there something you'd like to add?
No, I think that's extremely well summarized, Robin. When you think of dialogue, like there isn't enough dialogue in the world right now, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the ability, for people to connect through, as here's another one of my Maturana isms. We live together in language.
Mm-hmm.
That is how we live together. And is that a loving language, or is that something else? So, and I think that's really apropos to what you just said, Robin. So, yeah.
Okay, so more on the journey, the Conversant journey. You guys, when I first met you, had put out a declaration, and it fundamentally, when I'm interviewing you and you're interviewing me through those conversations, we're both deciding, is there a value fit? Because I don't work for people who our values are not aligned, because we can't get anything done together, because I'm not going to change your core values. I mean, that's fundamental. But you had issued something called It's Time for Change. And it is the reason, my defining moment, that I decided I'm going to do this. Can you talk a little bit about this courageous declaration, and can you share it with us? Why did you issue it first, and then what is it?
So just to give everybody sort of frame of reference, moment in time, this was in the weeks following George Floyd's murder. And we were wrestling ourselves with the emotions of that moment, and also looking at ourselves and realizing that we, in our hearts, believe difference plus trust brings brilliance in the world, and that we ourselves don't have enough difference among us. So that's sort of what was the starting point, I think. And frankly, we had a client or two that questioned us, like, where are you in this? Where's your voice in this? That sort of spurred us to say, like, okay, where is our voice? Why aren't we saying anything more broadly? And so a group of us, I think there were maybe 9 or 10 of leaders across the company, and others that had a deep passion for wanting to take a stand, got together and had a number of dialogues to really learn from each other about where did we stand, what did we believe, and then we collectively wrote It's Time for Change. It was written by the community, so there's lots of our voices are represented in it, and then we issued it to all of our clients at the time, and to anybody that subscribed to our newsletter.
Can you share it with us?
I need to read it. We sent it in early June of last year. Again, that sort of just, I think that moment in time is important. At Conversant, we are committed to an inclusive, just society without domination and abuse. A world where Black lives more than matter, where Black lives and contributions are recognized as additive to us all. That commitment requires that we face our own shortcomings and participate in building a future that heals and rights the moral wrong of systemic racism. We are saddened and outraged by the horrific treatment of the Black community that continues every day. Being silently supportive of this movement out of fear of saying the wrong thing or saying it imperfectly is no longer acceptable. We see that we have played a part in allowing systemic racism to be perpetuated through our complacency and insufficient action. It is time for change in the world, for all of us to awaken and take conscious responsibility for our actions. And that requires change in us. We believe the path forward starts with our own empathy and learning. Over the past few weeks, we have been spending time learning from others. We are continuing that work as we confront these questions. How do we use our privilege now? How will Conversant evolve? Racial equity has not been paramount in our societal conversations, perpetuating this systemic injustice. We know conversations make a difference. We thank and admire organizers and leaders who have dedicated their lives to reshaping systems designed to oppress. We see the risks you take, and through your actions, we are challenged to take risks ourselves. Over the coming weeks, we will actively seek Black voices and leaders using our platform to promote other resources we find helpful. We promise to be transparent about our own learning and public about our commitments. Our first, the next era of our company will look like the world, not like our founders.
And do you want to weigh in? Isn't that wonderful? I mean,
What I would add to it is, I feel really emotional, Robin, you reading it again.
yeah.
And it was, I think you're right, the community put that together, but it was under your leadership. So I just want to acknowledge that, because it's never easy. And, you know, we have to practice what we preach, which I think Conversant by and large does, which is, what's the conversation we need to be in? And how do we move beyond whatever defensiveness, you know, or justification may emerge, you know, and how do we move past fear? So it's something I feel proud of. And so I'm proud of you, Robin, as leader. And I just want to thank you for leading that effort.
Thanks, Ann.
And this to Robin, but Ann, please weigh in too. What was the impact?
You'll see in a few minutes, potentially, when I have a video of some folks in the firm. For us, there was a real feeling around integrity and how do we live in integrity with that, live in the gap of that declaration. So recognizing that there is a gap, that any declaration has a gap associated with it, right? You can declare something that is not yet true, right? And then how do you live in that space? And how do we live in that space with integrity, that we are not just caught in the day-to-day commercialism of being in a business, but actually how do we really say where we want to head? And so where that led us to, we had a number of really impassioned internal conversations about what to do to live in integrity with that. And I took a stand that just running out and hiring a handful of people of color was insufficient, like that was not us actually looking at who did we want to be in the world, and then how do we live inside of that. So we took a different track, right, really from that, and hired Michelle to help us, and Ann to help us come and really say, what is our vision? Now, how do we live inside of that and close the gap and live in integrity that way? So I think for me, the result of that was really us revisiting who are we in the world, what do we value, and then in the subsequent months really figuring out like, okay, how do we live inside those values? What does that mean? And has brought us to sort of where we are now, which is looking to see how do we build diversity, equity, and inclusion into all of our work, not as an add-on, but as actually part of the work that we offer in the world. And that's not an overnight flip the switch. So we're still figuring out how to do that and how to get the right resources to help us build that. So that's what I would say. Ann?
One of the things I would add is it really did cause a question of, well, who are our clients?
Mm.
And are we just taking whoever walks in the door? And I think it became much more intentional and probably strategic to say, where could we add the greatest contribution in the world? You know, who needs, you know, help with connecting conversations right now?
Mhm.
And how do we, with courage and curiosity, reach out and pursue that? And again, that's a process as well. You know, putting it out there, finding clients, obviously some of them in the governmental space, some in the nonprofit space or public-private partnerships. But I don't know, I think that's still being explored, right, Robin?
Yeah,
Let's not just wait.
there's more work to do there.
Yeah.
So it culminated in your shared vision and your core values that you call your promises. I think, would you share that with everyone, and then people can probe and ask questions or comments about it?
I can. It's probably be easiest if I share that in a way that everybody can see it. So
While Robin's doing that, the investment in conversation was tremendous. They didn't have the old obsolete mindset. When are we going to be done with this meeting and get back to work? They authentically believed conversation is the work. And I had many conversations with, you know, we had like different teams, and we had a design team. We had, and I talked with every single member in the community, man, globally. And I've got to say that the investment of time alone, remember, these are consultants. Billed by the hour. So the investment alone spoke volumes to your commitment to discovery, what this could lead to.
So this is the vision. And again, Michelle's point, I think it's a really important one. It was conversations internally. It was also conversations with clients, conversations with past clients. And there's one in particular I want to, I'll share a story in just a second about, but like that really was all of us coming together to work through this in a way that we felt aligned us towards something bigger for the future. So we awaken the world to the power and joy of authentic human connection, setting a new standard for leadership that produces meaningful, enduring impact. When we met with some existing clients, Michelle and Anne sort of helped us in a community dialogue. We'd actually been pretty far along. We had language that was, we thought, pretty close. And there were three past clients on the call who collectively said at the end, "You're not being bold enough. You need to like this," and I can't remember actually what the previous version was, but they said, it's not bold enough. We think what you've put here is wonderful, but represents who you are today. Like, what's the stretch beyond that? So there's two elements of this that we think for us feel big. We awaken the world feels big, but the other is setting a new standard for leadership also felt bold, that we have something to say about what does it take to lead in today's world in a way that is consistent with the nature of being human. So that was one part of it. I'll go ahead while I have the slides up, if it's okay, and show the values as well, because this was another, I think, for us, really meaningful part of this, is we said, okay, we're going to do that. Who do we have to be for ourselves and for each other? So while others will call these values, we decided to call it our promise, because we wanted to up the ante, so to speak. We were afraid that values in corporate speak have become so like placating. I don't even know the right words, but just sort of words on the wall that nobody actually follows. And we wanted something that felt more heartfelt to us. And so we wrote it as a promise. And all of the words here were really specifically chosen. And I'll say a little bit about it. For us, this phrase, purposefully present, really means something. It really takes an element of mindfulness, but actually mindfulness and intentionality together around what are we really paying attention to physically, in terms of how we feel emotionally, and in how we think. So really paying attention to all three of those. And they are authenticity, which is for us living true to who we say we want to be in the world. Community, which is the undying belief that we are better, stronger, smarter, more capable together, more joyful. Wonder, which is the possibility that there's always a better day ahead, right? That there's always something new to learn for us at both an individual and a collective. Difference, I said this earlier, that we innately believe difference plus trust equals brilliance, that's how we get smarter. And then love, which is a large part of why we're here. This was the one that I probably advocated for, and the one I probably got the most resistance from a few of our more senior folks, but not our more junior folks. We cap it at the tail end with, and we won't always get it right, with compassion and forgiveness, we will learn and grow together. So those two parts, both the vision and the promise, are sort of the next stage of the evolution, and we're sort of continuing the dialogues about them. One of the things I'm actually also really proud of in the organization is we have spent all of 2021 to date really investigating each one of these to say, what does it mean to us? So this was not a fast, like, here's words on a page. We have some words on a page that got us started, but we've spent anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks sitting with each one of these to say, what does it mean? How does it show up? What does it look like? What does it look like between us? What does it look like with our clients? I was impatient about that at the beginning, and I'm grateful for it today.
So just a comment, and you can weigh in, and anyone can weigh in with a question or comment, but the resistance, I don't believe there was a woman that resisted.
I think that's probably true. I think that's probably true.
I would add that, conversant, it's in the name, right? Words are really matter. They take the words seriously. Authenticity has been kind of co-opted by people in this day and age, where it means I'm just going to tell you what I think. I'm being authentic. And that's not the way conversant, or, certainly Robin or I define being authentic. Authentic is connected to purpose. And if you're authentic, you're looking for what's the way to have the conversation that will connect, so that authentic purpose can truly be served versus my, immediate reaction to something. So that matters. And the love part, Robin, you've done a talk on that, and I know you guys have heard me speak about it, but it's true. We really believe the work that's been done that talks about love, not in the romantic sense, but it's about seeing another as legitimate in your space. And that in legitimacy means you influence me, either by looking at you, hearing from you, whatever. And so I would say it's very, well, I'm glad it's at the center. Let me put it that way. I think it's very important.
Yeah, it frames everything, every other word. It's the essence of every other word. So you see it through that lens of love. You see wonder through love. You see difference through love. Robin, you have a unique, building on exactly what Anne said, your definition of love.
I've learned a lot from Anne and through Anne over the years. So what you'll hear me say sort of resonates with what she just said. I've also done quite a bit of study of bell hooks and her work about love, so that influences my thinking in this as well. So if I put sort of Umberto Maturana and your definition about as truly seeing another, and in a spirit of partnership for growth, right? So bell hooks, when I've read her work, it really is seeing another and as legitimate today, and seeing the potential, right? Like it's sort of my view that I've come to of how you put those two together. So to see as legitimate in this moment, and to hold out hope that all of us are, to hold the belief that all of us are complete yet unfinished, right? That there's more possibility, and that if we can all work together for that unfinishedness, right, to continue to evolve, we'll be better both individually and collectively. And better meaning more joyful, more fulfilled, more whole in the work that we do.
I have a question, Robin, for you. So this work in this day and age, how hard is it?
Ask me the question differently.
Well, I'm talking about with clients,
Yeah.
I mean, in this, I want to tell you what I really think world and, polarization and all that.
I think in today's world, there is more cynicism than there has from my experience in the past, particularly given the 4 years prior, right, and the divide that has happened in our politics and the lack of meaningful discourse in the media, right? So I've said for a long time, and I don't think you were with me. I was doing a presentation, a keynote for TNC one day, and I stood up and I said, if you turn on the news, we have terrible role models, right? Like the night before, I had literally watched it happened to be on CNN, but frankly, it happens on every single news outlet out there of people just yelling at one another and yelling their own opinions at one another to no conclusion, right? Other than just yelling. And so I think that because of the amplification of that in the media, which is where people are still steering off of as the way, how we communicate, that it becomes really challenging. I was with an organization last week, and a gentleman in the program said, but the person that yells loudest often does get their point across. Well, to what end, right? So you have a lot more yeah but today, I think, in that conversation, and maybe a lot more exhaustion. So maybe more pockets of hope of people going okay, and this can't continue. So maybe there's both. Maybe there's the cynicism and the sort of green shoots of there has to be another answer out there starting to pop up.
It's kind of a follow-on question to Anne's, Robin. And you mentioned that, these type of significant changes don't happen overnight. And when you're working with clients and you notice that, maybe someone on your own team or with the client, they fall back into that old traditional language of leadership or bad habits. How do you address that in the moment?
That's a great question. I don't think this will surprise anyone here. So a couple things. One is being able for us, and Anne said this, authenticity is living at the place of where are all of us together. So trying not to call people out. There's another colleague of ours, Michelle Wansley Ford, who gave me new language just recently about calling to people instead of calling out, or she said, or even calling in tends to have people feel like you're righteous and they're not. She said, so how do you call to, which I think is what we do, is really to say, what's at stake right now? So being clear about what is at stake, what is it that we're trying to accomplish together in the moment? And then how is that particular language or behavior not calling to community? Because most of it or difference or honoring difference, Darcy. And I think there's always more work to do here. So I think that's my answer for now. And there's always more work to be done.
I have a question, and this goes back a bit to my perspective on the world as a journalist, really, where I was always looking at injustice to expose, and now I see so much more injustice, really, while I hang on to trying to stay centered in a world that feels like it's unraveling many times. I mean, the climate emergency, racism, war, the growing chasm between rich and poor, and to hold on to a stubborn optimism in that. And I wonder what gives you hope in terms of dealing with this swirl of really, we're living in an exceptional time when we are all hyper connected, but also, to use Sherry Turkle's book title, Alone Together, on these screens. And I'm just wondering, in terms of your own your own personal connection to hope in all of that.
Yes, I have been accused of being an overly sunny-sided optimist, Roberta, so I appreciate that question. The reception that we've gotten when I share that we put love in our values has been overwhelmingly positive. So that's one, gives me hope, right? I have not had a single leader go, what? I've had new employees say it's what brought them here. I've had potential clients say, tell me more about that, right? But I've not had the, yeah, we're not going there reaction or that side. Now, to be fair, do I get a little of that side eye and I don't catch it? It's possible, right? So absolutely. So there's that. So yes, I had one gentleman in this group of 21 the other day give me pushback about, is this, and I had 20 others say this was the most amazing experience that they'd had. So, and even the one, by the way, so that one, by the third day, what he said is, I have seen that I have a lot to learn about my perspective about leadership. So that there's a crack in that veneer, at least for him, I'll take that. I'll take that as a win. So that gives me hope that people do long for another answer. On the whole, I also have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. So daughter just turned 22, son will turn 20 in a couple of weeks. I can't not have hope for them. And I see in them the possibilities for something different. My daughter is a neuroscience major coming out of William and Mary here in Virginia, committed to curing Alzheimer's. So she's going to go get her PhD. Like, she's just like this, and she's both skeptical and brilliant at the same time, right? Maybe those two things always go together. She happens to also be gay, and so stands for herself and her partner in big and small ways, which in the state of Virginia is not always easy. So being able to see the pride and the courage that they have in themselves, that's evolution from where I grew up. And when I was her age, I don't think I would have had that amount of courage. So
Nice. I have a 33-year-old as of Saturday has a doctorate in neuroscience, and the other daughter is gay, and happily so, in Brooklyn. And yeah, they are, of a different, definitely a different generation. I mean, I feel guilty about my generation in terms of the selfishness and what has happened on our dear planet. But the older daughter, the neuroscientist, is also, because of climate, really doesn't want to have children, and is a vegan, and is very conscious of her buying, like transportation costs and energy costs and wrapping and all of that. And I'm trying very hard in my old age to be much more respectful about energy and all of that. But I do have dark nights of the soul about, how to hang on to my stubborn optimism about the world is going to be okay. But I love I love the leadership values that you're engaged in and sharing.
And
it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I think we said this in many, many ways, but it's palpable. I mean, they never have to even say it. You'll be in a meeting, and every one of those words, somehow or another, you're going to particularly love, and being fully present. And I think that's kind of wrapped up in authenticity too. But I encourage you to tune into one of their community dialogues, because some of them are open to the public. You just feel it. And it reminds me of Herman Miller, where you could walk into an organization in Hong Kong and you felt that sense of pride and love. So that's where I get the hope, by the way.
We haven't talked much about the impact on clients, other than whether or not they like our values. But I'll tell you, from my perspective, it's been profound in that once we engage, we tend to be engaged for a very long time. Why? Because people feel, I guess they feel like, God, what I'm learning and what I'm gaining from the association is actually making my job easier. And I'm able to not just be more productive, but to feel like I'm a better person, a better leader. And, Robin knows this, a client that had, taken a lot of Conversant engagements and was kind of an in-house person representing it, passed away at the Nature Conservancy yesterday, and prematurely. And the way that organization is honoring her because of what she was living, and to feel like we could have contributed to her in that way, where her contribution was amplified, tremendously across that whole organization is, I mean, it's sad that she's gone from the planet, but it also feels like, wow, that's the kind of impact you want to have. It's a ripple effect where people, they don't have to work at Conversant in order to have been impacted and to be living these values and to see how it serves them and all the people they touch.
Her name was Nancy Kelly, based out of New York. I think it's important just to give
Say her name. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Darcy?
Darcy.
Yeah, Robin, you said something that has really kind of stuck with me. When the Magnolias first came together, we started talking about how do we bridge the gap, the ecological gap, the socioeconomic gap, the spiritual gap. And you said earlier, how do we live in that gap with integrity between our current reality and our vision for a different future? And thinking about the other divides, you know, we've stated them here: war and peace, rich, poor, right, left, love, hate, young, old. And I don't know that there's a question in there, but just that prompt of how we engage with integrity and calling two people in these conversations, because until we can get into deep dialogue with them, you know, these gaps, these divides will continue. So I'm just, it's kind of a reflection of what you said and just a deep question that I'm living with.
Yeah, Darcy, I felt the same way when Robin said that. I felt there's something pretty unique about this that maybe needs to be called out and put out there. Calling to resonated, as well as how do we stand, you know, in the gap, authentically live in the gap. I mean, there might be some magic in there, you know, to helping us navigate through these difficult times, because you're being authentic. Then you're you know, authentically to Roberta's issue. It looks dark, but yet how do I hold on to hope at the same time, and then find a way to movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
we do this program, and is quite fond of it, as am I, called Credibility, Influence, and Impact. We do a week at a horse ranch with leaders because we think there's a lot to learn from horses about leadership and about how we show up. And some of the lessons that I've learned in that are, like, they seem sort of tangential to what's going on, but and you can help me with some of the horse philosophy on this, but there are times when you want to go in a particular direction with a horse and the horse does not want to go that way, does not want to go. Like, and, you know, I am a good sized woman, but I do not compete with a 2-ton animal, right? Like, cannot compete from like strength of will. And so like the wranglers will say, well, get him to take a step, him or her, to take a step in the direction he wants to go, then redirect, right? And there's something about that, I think, about the world as well, right? Like, and I've learned this lesson from you about how do you go where the energy is and then see what's possible from there, as opposed to like force of wills. Because I think the force of wills, Darcy, back to your point, is too often how we go after it, right? Like my will versus your will. we're not getting anywhere. We use Akita at the martial art as another sort of representation. Darcy, I think you probably do as well, right? Like, but how do you use sort of both the physical force of two to actually move in a particular direction? I think there's a lot in that for us to learn around how do we use the mutual forces that we all are for in the world to move in a mutual direction. And I recognize that there are some forces that are just against one another that make this really hard. But I think there's something about how do we, one of the things that we're starting to look at with diversity, equity, and inclusion, for too long, I think it's been a program that you do sort of adjunct to other work. And when we say we want to build it in, when we say set a new standard, my vision is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of that new standard. It's not like an add-on thing that you have to teach people. It's actually part of what you need as a leader to be paying attention to in leadership, not not just if you've had a problem, not just if you've been written up, not just if your organization suddenly decides that their numbers aren't where they want them to be, or because their reports are bad, or blah, blah, like, or they've been sued, or they're in the media, like not, but like, no, actually to lead in this world, in the going forward, you have to be an inclusive leader. You have to actually be paying attention to what does that mean? Where has your privilege gotten you, and how do you actually look and see other people's points of view in that? And so like for me, that's a difference of like, how do we pull people together and move in that direction, as opposed to calling people out and making them wrong in that, which I think is a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
Exactly, Darcy, baked in, not bolted on. And actually, like what we started thinking about, we do a lot of work in culture change. Jackie, I'm sorry, I'll come. We do a lot of work in culture change. How do we start to see diversity, equity, and inclusion is culture change, right? Like for where we are today, that is actually, if you really are going to take that on, you can't do it in a programmatic way. It has to be part of how you're changing the everyday conversations that you're in. And I don't think people are thinking about it that way yet. They're still thinking about it like a point solution, which I don't think is going to work. Sorry, Jackie, I know you had your hand up.
No worries. I was listening to a video of you before the session today. And one of the things I really loved about what you said when you were talking about Umberto Maturama's biology of business, and the notion that love is the emotion that expands intelligence and creativity. And that what I zeroed in on personally was that you said, I don't have to like them. I don't have to like their personality, but I can love them, meaning that I can connect to their dignity and connect with them with dignity and respect. And so I have this image of this 2-ton horse going in a particular direction, particularly in our polarized environment right now, and allowing people to go in their direction, but just to treat them with dignity and respect, not necessarily liking what they're doing or liking what they're saying. And I think that it really changes and elevates the consciousness of me as an individual when I hold that. So I'm very appreciative to you for saying that. And I also think about language and how words create worlds, words create consciousness. And the notion that the English language is so linear and sequential, and we have one word for love. And Sanskrit has 96 words for love. And I would love for us to be able to, look at this and maybe expand our vocabulary around love and elevate our discourse around it. But thank you for adding to my elevation of consciousness, because that really struck me.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, I mean, this I believe is the discussion that we need to have the courage to have. And I'm so appreciative that this organization has taken it on wholeheartedly. So I know we're running out of time, and I don't want to lose some thoughts about being a women leader. So I'd like you to share, Robin, what do you think the unique contributions women bring as leaders? I
knew Michelle was going to ask this. She also asked for another interview that we were in recently, and I actually asked one of my colleagues, Ann Roger Henderson, said something sort of in passing one day around, well, you have to be part of this. I don't know what we would like. The feminine that you've brought to it's been so important, and it was sort of like this very like passing remark. And so I went back to him and said, like, wait, can you say more about that? And so I actually had him answer this question. I have the video, but Michelle, do you want me to just paraphrase what he said? Because maybe that's just as helpful.
Sure, but can we end with the Conversant video where people are saying the impact of
sure.
the vision?
I'd love to.
Okay.
And so what he said is that he notices that I do, but he sort of expanded it to women, and I agree, is this care for the whole is what he said. Like this care and attention to not just what's happening in this moment, but what that means over a longer period of time. I do think that there's something about the feminine that women bring to that in turn. And care is another one of those words that I think has been made soft and weak, that I actually think is a really strong, powerful word. I think care helps all of us to be at our best. I don't see how that's weak, right? But I think there's this notion that care or support is weak. I actually think if we think about leadership as how do we all be smarter and better together? I think that requires caring for the whole, right? To actually be better and smarter together, to be paying attention to the individual and the collective impact. And I think that that is a unique talent that women bring, is being able to pay attention to both what's in front of us right here, but also sort of the bigger picture. Maybe it's the gatherer in us, like from the gatherer days, right? Of having to actually pay attention to what's going on a much broader scale than hunting what's right in front of us. But I do think that there's something about sort of this bigger perspective and being able to take a step back, noticing what's happening in the moment, but also seeing this is where that's going to go in ways that I think are unique and powerful and necessary particularly when we start talking about systems in the way that a move over here makes such a difference on things that we are not noticing.
Robin, can I ask you about the lovely cow over your left shoulder? She's very feminine. And is there a story to her? She's not a horse.
She's not a horse. She's definitely a cow. That wall was blank for a lot of years. And I don't know why. I love cows. I don't have a reason for, I find them fascinating and intriguing. And my wonderful husband bought this for me for Mother's Day one year. And she has just, I guess, I don't know if she's just, she's become quite, I had said to Michelle, should I take her down? And somebody on the team said, you can't, like everybody knows you for the cow. And it's totally true, because depending how I'm sitting, she's either looking over my shoulder, or if I move this way, she looks over this shoulder. She entertains me.
She entertains all of us. She's really quite beautiful. I just, was curious. There's so much seriousness in the world. There's something I love about her curious look over my shoulder, like she's saying, "What are you doing?" Yeah, it's unexpected, and it's lovely. Yeah,
thank you.
Just really like your cow.
Thank you.
So I'd like to end with the clip, because I really want you to see some of the faces of Conversant. And what was the question you asked them, Robin?
Yes. Well, you'll see the question. It's been almost a year since we began our re-enchantment process. What for you has been the impact of our collective investment in our vision statement and our promise? I want to just say at the start, I put this request out on a Thursday afternoon and told everybody I needed their 30-second videos by Friday. So there was very little prep that went into this, and this was literally the question, and then we just let people riff on whatever they wanted to say. This is not everyone, simply because we couldn't get everyone, but I'm quite proud of this. So I thank you, Michelle, for letting me.
And while she gets that going, and we aired it that following Monday on the Great Leadership Reset presentation she gave.
Great.
Yep.
The vision and promises are what drew me to want to be a member of the team. I mean, quite simply put, they were the draw. They are aligned 100% with my personal values and how I strive to live my life. So they have deep meaning to me personally. And they're not just words on a page. We challenge ourselves daily to live the promises within our community and with our clients. And while we're not physically together as a team all the time, I see them as the bond that creates our strong community. And the mere fact that you're asking the question represents to me how important these values are and the promises are to our community. So thank you for asking.
To me, the greatest impact of doing the re-enchantment over the past year and a half or so, or past year, and the resulting vision and promises is, two things, I guess. Number one, it has coordinated everyone. We're all in the same thing now. And number two, it really resonates deeply. I think it was one of those, we all recognized it once we got there and once we saw it. We have the vision, we have the promises, we all recognize ourselves in it. I recognize myself in all of it. It's exciting because it's like, oh, wow, yes, this is true. It always has been true, but we weren't able to say it or make it explicit. And now we have it. We recognize that, and we're all now running or rowing in the same direction. And to me, that's the single greatest impact that I absolutely love about it. It makes me feel significantly more connected to community as a coherent community around the vision and values we now have. And it just makes the work, the relationships, the organization, what we're doing in the world, what we're aspiring to be, that much more joyful and enjoyable.
Personally, I've really enjoyed the re-enchantment conversations. They've been a great opportunity to process together as a community, what do these visions and values truly mean to us? I've learned that integrity is really important to me. And when I say integrity, I think I mean something akin to structural soundness. So it's a consistency between being and doing. And I think that these conversations have really bolstered that in our community. I see them popping up in our day-to-day, passing in the office conversations, as well as at the beginning of our meetings, and then in really focused dialogues about what does difference mean to us, and what does that actually look like in our community.
As a new hire who was hired subsequent to that work, it was really nice to come into an environment when everyone's on the same page, everyone's really aligned about, what is the purpose of this company? What are our values? What's our true north? What is everything kind of aligning up to? That makes the onboarding process just that much easier for someone new like me. And the other part is it's very clear that this is not something that was just sort of done top down, right? Management didn't come out and just say, here's our purpose, our vision, our values. By the way, just make sure you guys are aligned with this. This was something that was clearly cultivated over a period of time, getting input from everybody throughout the company. And because all of their voices were involved, that is what makes it feel so strong and so cohesive now that everyone is so signed on to it.
Developing a unified vision statement and promises or values for our company has actually helped me see and appreciate and respect the differing voices and perspectives that each one of us brings to that vision. Instead of seeing them as competing future states or opinions, I see how each of those elements and notes really build a cohesive whole. And that's been really exciting for me.
The promises have been an authentic, genuine way for us to true when things break down. Having the promises there to guide the conversation, to remind us of what we claim to be about, to help us stay true, even when it's really hard, to something that we've all said, yeah, that us. We want to be more like that.
I think the re-enchantment work has made us braver in our purpose and enlarged our capacity for community to be big enough for anyone.
Having come to Conversant after the re-enchantment, I had the privilege of entering a team that is profoundly committed to exploring difference and improving upon mistakes when they're made, instead of brushing them under the rug or reprimanding them, when they can instead be addressed in such constructive ways. And I'm really proud to be here.
For me, the impact of the re-enchantment work over the last year seems to be that there's been this really vibrant rediscovery for everyone about all these things about Conversant, our identity, who Conversant is in the world, what we want to do, how we are together. There's been a lot of discussion that's laid down some new elements, but in that there's been a lot of rechurning up of some wonderful elements I think have been maybe forgotten or just not utilized in conversation and the work as often. And that reawakening of who we are has really been a powerful impact, I think, on the community. I think it helps shape the new elements we're able to lay down and complete in terms of who Conversant is and where we're going to go and how we're going to do it. So I think that reawakening for people inside the community and sort of a rebirth for everybody has really been powerful. I think the outcome of that is an even more unified, collaborative team that is really filled with joy and love and excitement and direction about who Conversant is going to be in the world going forward. And to me, that's been the greatest impact of the re-enchantment.
I think that the re-enchantment process gave us something really meaningful to put our energy and attention towards during a time when we were all separated and we felt very disconnected and the world and the future was very uncertain. And through that process, I feel like we deepened our sense of community and connection. And now that we have the vision and the values, we can all see ourselves in them. We can see one another in them. We know exactly why we chose the words we did. And even people that have come into the company since we did that process, I feel like we can really explain well what that means to us. And even they have come on board the vision and get excited and energized about it as well. I think it helps us make decisions that are going to have a different impact. It helps us prioritize where we spend our time and energy. And we're all building a future that we care about together. And I feel the commitment from everyone. We use the language all the time. And it's even something that we're proud to talk about with our clients, which is exciting. So I think it's been a very positive thing for us to invest in over the last year.
We have now experienced what it really takes to live into a vision and promises. And we've learned ways that work really well and ways that don't work as well. And I feel the result of that is our integrity has taken a big step forward in working with other organizations in doing the same thing. And I'd say we understand the long road of this, but we also understand maybe some of the nuance and some of the easier things to do to help organizations move towards a strong vision and promises or values.
The impact of our reenchantment has been extraordinary. It's allowed for a beautiful, powerful vision to emerge from a new generation of Conversant leaders. It's also given us areas of focus, culturally and commercially, promises that those leaders are managing that we keep. And what it's led to is a period of extraordinary community and contribution. I feel like the vitality of our enterprise is soaring. It's also not only an emotional invigoration because our revenues are up this year over last and even exceed what we thought we were going to do this year. So all in all, I think the reenchantment has been extraordinarily impactful. And I'm very, very pleased that we've gone through that journey together.
Wow. Thank you, Robin. And we do have one question that I think I'm supposed to ask. What is it, Darcy? You can ask the question. I want to make sure I get it right, or we get it right.
Yeah, so we've been asking each of the incredible women who have joined us, what are their 3 calls to action? What are 3 things that anybody can do? And, you know, in some cases, it's been around the environment, climate, or one of the sustainable development goals. But from your perspective and, you know, what you've shared with us today, what are 3 things that anybody can do?
Well, if you've watched my video, so Jacqueline, this will ring true because it's the 3 things I tell leaders just in general. And I think you could do these 3 to have there be more love and community in any organization. Be way more curious and way less certain. Ask better questions. So the example I use often is, too often in meetings, the question is like, what are the results? How are we doing in terms of results? I want to know how much joy and what are the results? So it's an and. So ask better questions and then listen to the damn answers.
Oh, anyone else? Any comments or questions? Well, I just want to thank you so much, Robin, both for who you are and for sharing who you are and the Conversant journey with us today. I know you've seen our website and you clearly touch almost all of them. Feminism, conscious leadership, love and well-being. We didn't know which one to label you as. And that's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. So just our heartfelt deep appreciation for your openness and the way in which you share your heart and your journey with us.
Well, thank you all for having me. The questions and the conversation from all of you really, this is how we learn, right? This is how I learn anyway, is from all of you. So thank you for the inspiring conversation for today on a Monday.
Thank you, Robin, so much.
Sarah,
Thank you, Robin.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I've been very silent because I've been busy recording our conversation. But I just want to say, Robin, thank you so much. You have given me so much hope. I just wrote this book called I Choose Love. And it took me a lot of courage to call it something with love in the title. And like you, I am so, I don't even have words right now, but you have just given me so much hope in how we can move forward doing this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a
That's
joy
awesome.
sharing this with you.
Great. So great. It does take, Sarah, I long for the day when saying love does not take courage.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
That is a great quote to end with.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Thank
you, Robin.
Thank you.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she wears the crown? What happens when she rules her own body? What happens when she sets the beat? What happens when she bows to nobody? What happens when she stands on her own 2 feet? What happens when a woman takes power?